Hey, welcome back, everyone, to episode number 4 in the Echoes of Tyranny, How Fiction Foretold Our Present series. We've been digging deep into the big ideas of dystopian literature, looking for truths that are relevant to our lives today. And along the way, you have been and are continued actually by me challenging you to read 2 books, 1984 by George Orwell and Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. And for those that genuinely want the most in-depth understanding of our topics, highly encouraged. It's always great to be reading something all the time. But hey, maybe you just are tuning in for the first time. You're along for a ride of just the podcast version. That's all good too. I'm just glad to have you here. But today we're taking on a topic that's been bugging almost all civilization, really, since we realized that the internet isn't the all-knowing oracle of honesty and open dialogue we were told it was going to be, or we thought it was going to be. And so the topic today is the idea of truth versus reality. We know for certain that Orwell and Huxley, they were deeply concerned about the manipulation of truth and reality and how facts that should be considered solid and unchangeable, they actually can be bent through all kinds of different tactics. And they figured this out way before the internet arrived. But yeah, truth and reality, they're not the same thing. Sometimes we like to think they are. And in our postmodern world especially, it's almost like they're 2 different people at a dance who just can't seem to find the same rhythm. One is trying to dance waltz, and the other one is locked in on salsa. It's disjointed, yet somehow they're still on the same dance floor together. So let's set the scene of this idea of truth versus reality. And we're going to start in the 17th century. There was a philosopher named Descartes, French philosopher, and one night he's sitting down and, I don't know, in an existential funk of sorts, and he comes up with this question, and it says, how do I know anything in my life is real? I mean, it's a deep, deep question. And from that moment of doubt comes a very famous line, his most famous line he ever spoke or wrote about, and that's, I think, therefore I am. In real simple terms, Reader's Digest terms, what he meant was that the only thing that he could be absolutely sure of was his own existence, because he could think. This idea set the stage for separation of truth versus reality. And fast forward to Orwell and Huxley, who took that separation and they ran with it. They saw truth as something that could and should be solid, like Descartes' certainty, but he noticed how easily reality, through governments, through media, through propaganda, through just mere distraction, could be manipulated. In their words, truth is one thing, but reality can get twisted and reshaped and spun until it's almost barely recognizable. We see this all the time with in politics, presidential politics especially, where the way someone is one time doesn't match when election season comes around. I've actually been absolutely amazed. I'm scarily amazed of what they've done with Kamala Harris. And, you think about it, before Joe Biden dropped out of the race, Kamala was, by many records and many polls, like the least popular vice president almost in the history since they'd been recording that. And the media would just trounce on her, make fun of her word salads, and make fun of her her basic incompetence, I guess you could say, or lack of getting anything done in the minimum. But all of a sudden, Joe Biden drops out. She's inserted in place, and now she's joyful and fresh breath of fresh air. A competent, sound former attorney general. They literally, in the span of almost 2 weeks, completely reshaped this person into somebody that almost seems unrecognizable in many ways. But in short, Descartes or Orwell, Huxley, they show us that truth, that's the thing that you know for sure. But reality, like when we walk around the streets, we look at the newspapers, we see the things around us, that reality can be distorted. And you say, no, that's not true. Reality is real. It's what I see. Think about it. On a presidential debate, do something for me if you have the ability to do it. Tune in, watch the debate, and then right after the debate's over, flip to a conservative cable TV show. Hear how they portray that event, and then turn around and flip and watch a liberal media outlet. Their reality is going to be very different than the reality of a conservative news outlet. That's why we got to be real careful, all of us, to not get sucked into these bubbles. But that's Descartes. That's where we start. But you fast forward even a little bit further. We'll go up to from the 17th, 200 years later, the 19th century, and things get wild. And enter this philosopher, maybe one of my favorite of all time, Friedrich Nietzsche. And, this is the same guy who declared God is dead. Now, he wasn't saying it in a, whoops, my bad, or yay, this is wonderful. Nietzsche was pointing out that the big truths that society and civilization had relied on since for thousands of years, like religion, that they were crumbling underneath. And what do we do when our truths fall apart? Well, I mean, in Nietzsche's view, we're left to create our own reality. It's like he handed us the keys to a car with no GPS and said, "Good luck, buddy. Make your own path. Get yourself over to this restaurant over here, all on your own." That's kind of what Nietzsche was saying when the institutions that were falling away and falling apart. But here's where it really gets juicy. You go even one more into the 20th century, and now comes a gang of thinkers, and they're known as the postmodernists. And Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, Jean Baudrillard. I mean, these guys, they weren't just philosophers. They were rock stars of intellectual life of the time. And they all had one big message: truth. And they were like, that's not what you think. Reality? That's up for grabs too. It isn't a coincidence that our twin pillars of dystopian literature, which we have been analyzing, Orwell and Huxley, they both wrote in the 20th century. Think of it like this. You're watching a magic show, and the magician pulls a rabbit out of the hat, and the crowd just gasps in amazement. I mean, we've seen the little trick 1,000 times, but here's the postmodern twist. Derrida leans over and whispers, the rabbit isn't actually real. And neither is the hat. And Foucault chimes in and says, who said you could trust a magician? Suddenly you're questioning literally everything. Even your choice to attend a magic show in the first place. Well, if none of it's real, why am I even here in the first place? I shouldn't even have come here. Think about it. How often are we told, what you're seeing is not really what has happened? I didn't actually say X, Y, or Z. What I actually said was blah, blah, blah. I mean, we hear politicians do this all the time. Even as you're reading in black and white, a perfectly articulated quote, or watching a video, and the words are clearly that come out their mouth, what is truth and what are real are now subjective, up to interpretation, personal preference. And the apparent connection between truth and reality has now been completely split. Now no longer are the two even on the same dance floor together. And if you go through phases of it's easy to just go through phases as maddening rage as politicians or people splitting these things two up, and they leave us wondering what in the hell is going on here. Well, now you have a little bit of the philosophical background of how we got here. So what do we mean when we say truth and reality, they're not the same? In the postmodern world, truth isn't solid. It's not an unchanging thing. It's more like Play-Doh. Truth it's malleable. It's shaped by whoever's holding it. Play-Doh's fun. You make all kinds of different shapes. You can, if you don't like what you made with it, you can just smash it back into a ball, start all over again. Reality, what's that? Well, that's where it gets tricky, because reality is supposed to be what's really out there beyond our perceptions. It's supposed to be the natural world, but how do we know what's real if our truths are shaky? It's like trying to sit in an office chair with only 2 legs instead of the 4. The foundation is upset. It doesn't work right. So these existential philosophers went so far as to insinuate and say that we live in a hyper reality. And that's where our perceptions, the media, all the social constructs we've built up over the centuries are so overwhelming that they just replace reality in general to whatever the narrative might be. Remember when you saw that picture of a stunning beach on Instagram? I'm sure you've seen them, or pictures on the internet somewhere, and thought, wow, I wish I were there. Well, these postmodernists would say, well, you're already lost in hyperreality. You know, that beach, it might not even exist outside your phone screen, so don't even worry about it. And where does this leave us? Floating in some bizarre philosophical matrix where truth and reality are now and forever and going to be out of reach. I mean, have we gotten that far that we can never actually determine what is truth and what is reality? Well, maybe, but here's the good news in this. The whole truth versus reality debate, it's not some brainy exercise for grad students. I mean, it really does matter, and it matters because it makes us question what we accept as real. And it makes us more critical of the narratives that we're fed, whether they come from the news, social media, or even our own heads. And I think already we're getting a more and more of a backlash against, well, I'm not sure we can call it a backlash. Maybe better, I should say, that we're more aware of how different forces are trying to manipulate our reality, whether that reality would be in news headlines or AI-generated video or just the government propaganda that comes out. So I don't think we figured out how to solve this yet, but it does appear at least that the general public has now become fully awake to the fact that the postmodern view, and especially the politicians, are manipulating us. And that's at least a step in the first direction. Okay, but I think we're now 4 episodes into our dystopian literature novels, and I want to sort of give a recap of where we have been, especially for those reading along, since I've definitely been encouraging to do so and not just listening in, or even for those just tuning into the podcast. I want you also to have a feel for where these novels have gone, where they're going, because it relates to everything that we're talking about. in this lecture series. So from just the storyline perspective, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but it's important just to have the background where we're pulling all these concepts and ideas from. It's awesome stories, and we love the stories. So here's a brief overview of where we've been. And first, let's talk about Orwell in 1984. And so in the first module, which covers the first few chapters, you're in this place called Oceania, and it's where Big Brother he's always watching everything, and reality is whatever the party says it is. And we meet our main character, Winston Smith, and he's this weary, quietly rebellious person. And he's trudging through the gray, the oppressive streets of what was formerly known as London. And in this world, their thoughts aren't their own, and Winston knows it. He's already contemplating defiance. He just feels the weight of the party's iron grip on every aspect of life. And unlike some people, he doesn't just blindly accept it. He feels something in him is wrong. And from the constant surveillance to the ever-present propaganda that's just pounding into them, Winston's introduction is a very bleak glimpse into a society where truth is malleable commodity and it's twisted to suit whatever the party's needs. And then what would coincide with Module 2, it's, okay, so you're now getting exposed to the heart of control. And we get to see Winston at his quote-unquote day job at the Ministry of Truth, and where literally his job is to rewrite history daily. Go back into the newspapers, go back into the official records, go back in anywhere, anything that needs to be changed, massaged, rewritten, redirected. That's what Winston does. And in his world, at work, facts are completely fluid, like water. And here's where Winston's subtle rebellion starts to take root. This dangerous dance that he's doing with becoming a dissenter. And he begins tipping his toe in even a little deeper, and he scribbles forbidden thoughts into a journal, which you cannot do. It's a very treacherous act of free will, where, I mean, just your thoughts alone could get you killed, because thoughtcrime, as it's called, it's not just a word, it's a menace. And the invisible shackles that bind every citizen are the things you think have to align with the party, and definitely anything you would ever write down or keep, that would be a big problem. By the third module, that content's aligning with the introduction of Julia. And this is the wild card in Winston's life. She's young, she's fiery, and against all odds, a seemingly odd couple for sure, because Winston's definitely older and Julia's much younger, and probably, it'd be one of those situations where you see a couple together and the woman is beautiful and the guy's just kind of this frumpy middle-aged dude, and like, oh, where in the world did that come? Obviously, he must have money or something. Well, Winston has no money. He's just old and frumpy. But somehow, some way, Julia and Winston, they form a romance. And so they're in this secret, passionate affair. And I mean, it is on the surface a romance, a forbidden romance. But deeper, it's a rebellion, because every kiss, every whispered word, it's a slap in the face of Big Brother and his control. They should not be doing this. And this relationship becomes this, inside of a very dark novel, this a flicker of warmth and humanity in a very cold and calculated world. So together they find moments of freedom, not very often, where they escape out of the city into the country and they're together. And in these fleeting seconds, they can be themselves, unobserved, unafraid. And then where we're at here, if you look at the reading materials for Module 4, now all of a sudden, Julia and Winston's bonds are firm. And they even starting to rent a little side apartment, which is a huge, huge risk. And also Winston is drawn into a darker, even more dangerous conspiracy. And this is the Brotherhood. This is the resistance. This is the rebellion group that's going up against Big Brother. And a figure emerges. His name's O'Brien. He's very mysterious, allegedly with connections to the resistance. He notices something in Winston, and he offers him a glimpse of hope in the form of Goldstein's book. And Goldstein is another shadowy figure. He's the poster child for the rebellion and how evil it is. And the party and the Big Brother is constantly warning against Goldstein. And O'Brien actually gets him a copy of Goldstein's book, which is supposed to be the ultimate guide to understanding the party's control. But this isn't just light bedtime reading. It's a manifesto. And even opening up the book could cost him literally everything. And as Winston delves deeper, the lines between rebellion and recklessness, they get more and more blurred. And it's leading him further and further down the path of no return. It's almost like at this point where we're at today, it's like something really bad is probably going to happen. It's probably not going to be a glorious Disney movie finish. It's almost, even though he's getting pulled in this direction, it's almost like this tidal wave that he's just not going to be able to escape. And so that's where we are right now in the novel 1984, if you're reading along. If not, plenty of time to catch up. Now, the other side of the coin is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. And so let's just run through real quickly kind of where we're at in this particular novel as it pertains to our discussions today. So in Module 1, those first few chapters, you're kind of welcome to the world state. I mean, it's shiny, it's sterile. It's almost like a utopia where everything is engineered for perfection and individuality, though it's a pretty dirty word. We're all in this together. We kick things off at the hatchery and the conditioning center, where human beings aren't born any longer. They're manufactured like a product. Genetic engineering is the name of the game, and from the moment of conception, every single citizen is conditioned to fit into a predetermined role. And so what's the result? A society where everyone's happy, everyone's satisfied, everyone's completely under control. Nobody questions anything. It's like the perfection of social engineering. It's a world where the concept of family and love, even personal ambition, individual achievement, it's been scrubbed away, literally from birth, and replaced with a cold, calculated order. In Module 2, we get into a couple of the key figures inside of Brave New World. We meet Lenina Crown and Bernard Marx. And these are two of their souls that are struggling in their own ways in the world state. Lenina, with her perfect looks, perfect conditioning, starts to feel some cracks in her seemingly flawless life. And Bernard, on the other hand, is overtly troubled. He's an alpha, which is in the social engineering process, puts him at the top of the food chain. but his mind just doesn't fit into this neat little box that society has made for him. And they're both struggling in their own unique ways. And it highlights the superficiality in this module of relationships, where even the simplest human connections are reduced to meaningless interactions. It's so meaningless, in fact, that they just randomly just have moments where they just have sex with each other just for the heck of it. But beneath the veneer of contentment, especially with these two figures, there's an unsettling level of discontent. And so as we move into module 3, there's a wild detour that happens from this perfectly engineered world into the untamed lambs of the savage reservation. And here Bernard and Lenina encounter something, or rather someone, that turns their understanding of the world upside down. And they meet a man called John the Savage. He was born naturally. He wasn't raised in the world of social engineering. He was raised in the untamed, uncontrolled world. And he was raised on the reservation. And John's life is in complete contrast to the world state's manufactured existence. And it's through his eyes that we start to see the true cost of the world state's pursuit of stability and order, and just sacrificing everyone's individuality for that. And John, he is raw, he is unfiltered humanity. And when Bernard and Lenina meet him, it's fascinating but terrifying at the same time. And it challenges everything that they've ever been conditioned to believe. And then where we're kind of ending up right now, in Module 4, there's a clash of worlds that's introduced. And this is as John and his mother, Linda, they're taken out of the reservation, out of the untamed, out of the unregulated reservation, and they're brought back to the city. They're brought back to London. And John, the embodiment of natural humanity, is thrust into the heart of the world state, where his values and beliefs just collide head on with a society that's forgotten what it means to even be human. His struggle isn't just a personal one. It's a battle against a system that has traded freedom and individuality for comfort and conformity. And that tension between John's raw emotions and the world state's calculated indifference, I mean, it lays bare really fundamental conflicts at the heart of Huxley's vision, his dystopian vision. Okay, great. I think that sort of resets our cast of heroes and villains and storylines from these two amazing novels. And again, be failing if I wouldn't highly recommend that you check out the show notes, as each episode in this series, I give you a reading list and that you can use to follow along as we push our way through this dystopian literature series. And I promise you will not be disappointed in reading or maybe rereading these novels. Because in our world today, wow, I think you couldn't find more incredible real-world-like pieces of art that demonstrate so much of what's happening in our world today. Okay, but let's get back to the crux of the episode and dive into the murky waters of truth manipulation. Let's talk about truth, and we'll talk about it Orwellian style first. Yep, you guessed it. 1984, back to that dark dystopian masterpiece. And specifically, we're going to unpack, as it regards to truth and truth manipulation, the idea that's in the novel of Newspeak, Doublethink, Ministry of Truth. Sounds like quite the party, right? Real happy topics, but don't worry, we'll have some fun with it along the way. But Orwell didn't just wake up one day and decide to write maybe one of the most depressing books of the 20th century. He was making a point about power and control, and most importantly, how the truth can be twisted, can be turned inside out, and then paraded around like it's always been that way. So let's break it down. First, we've got newspeak. And when I say newspeak, it's like Newspeak, newspeak. If you're unfamiliar, newspeak is the official language of Oceania and the fictional superstate, but it's not just any language. It's a language that was designed and created not to expand thought, idea, creativity, but to limit thought. Yeah, you heard that right. The whole idea behind newspeak is that if you can control the words people use, you can control what they think. Imagine expressing a rebellious idea when the words freedom or rebellion, they don't even exist in the language of newspeak. It's like trying to dance without any music. This is where we bring in a little help from our philosophical friends. There's a guy named Ludwig Wittgenstein, and sorry, I butchered the pronunciation, but he was a philosopher, and he believed that the limits, he said this, quote, "the limits of my language mean the limits of my world." In other words, if you can't say it, you eventually won't be able to think it. And Orwell takes this idea and he cranks it up to 11. Newspeak isn't just a language, it's a tool of oppression. It's designed to make certain thoughts literally unthinkable. In the world of Oceania, the chilling impact of complete control over words is astounding. And so here's one quote from the novel, "Don't you see that the whole aim of newspeak is to narrow the range of thought? In the end, we shall make thoughtcrime literally impossible because there will be no words in which to express it," end quote. And at another point, the party proudly states, quote, "It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words," end quote. Another one, by 2050 or earlier, probably all real knowledge of old speak will have disappeared. The whole literature of the past will have been destroyed, end quote. Now these quotes reflect a very sinister nature of newspeak, where reducing vocabulary is seen as a way to limit the range of thought and ultimately control the population. And the long-term goal of newspeak is to eradicate the language of the past, which will sever any connection to previous ideas or histories or truth that could ever challenge the party's control. That's how powerful that the party believes words are. Sometimes right now it feels like we're living in a newspeak moment, doesn't it? If you've ever wondered whether Orwell's 84 was just a bit too prophetic, well, you're not alone. So let's break down, because the way language is twisted today and turned in today's postmodern culture has some eerie similarities to Orwell's dystopian vision. In 1984, in the novel 1984, newspeak wasn't just another language. It was a weapon. It was a weapon because words, they matter. They matter a lot. And the party designed it to shrink the range of thought. I think a perfect analogy is this. I live on the Gulf Coast of Florida, and I have to say the sunsets off the Gulf of Mexico can be, stunning, miraculous, almost beyond words sometimes. It's just incredible. However, the reduction of language by newspeak would be like a master painter attempting to capture the crazy shades of colors during a sunset, and you're only given 2 colors in your palette. See, the subtlety, the depth, the whole experiencing of witnessing the sunset in a picture would get lost if the painter is not allowed to use the entire spectrum of colors. Likewise, controlling language, the party made sure that a lot of ideas couldn't even be formed in the minds of Oceania's citizens. Ideas like individuality, freedom, personal successes, or phrases like life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, they're simply lost or they're dumbed down to phrases that do nothing but serve the party. We see a lot of parallels today. Take a look at how governments and corporations are playing with language. In some places, state-controlled media censorship are so tight that only the official narrative gets through. Sounds just like the party's playbook, and it creates information vacuums where dissenting voices are silenced, not by force, but by simply erasing the words that could express those thoughts. Even in democratic societies, we aren't off the hook, that's for sure. Ever notice how euphemisms and politically correct language are used to smooth over the rough edges of reality? It's like wrapping barbed wire in silk. Sure, it looks nice, but underneath, the truth is being sanitized, it's being distorted, even buried. And Orwell warned us about this, how politically correct language or political language can hide, that's propaganda pushed by a state, can hide ugly realities and narrow the range of what we can actually think or what we can say. It used to be, we have this battle with immigration right now. And on one side of the house, they will still actually say illegal immigrants, meaning they entered the country without having the proper documentation to enter the country, meaning they broke the law, meaning it's illegal. On the other side of the spectrum, you will never hear out of their mouths the word illegal in front of immigrant. They will use maybe a word like undocumented, which doesn't sound nearly as bad as illegal now, does it? They're just missing a piece of paper. They're not here illegally, they're just missing a piece of paper. See how just subtleties like that can shift a perception one way versus the other. But let's not forget the corporate angle. I mean, companies today, they're almost like modern ministries of truth. They have algorithms, they have content filters, they have data surveillance, and they're shaping what you and I see and read and believe. They may not be rewriting history like the party does at the Ministry of Truth, but they're creating these echo chambers by controlling the flow of information. Only certain viewpoints will get amplified, while others will be quietly suppressed. It's like Orwell's worst fears realized. But instead of a grim government, in many cases, it's tech giants pulling the strings. And in other cases, it's the government working in collusion with big tech companies that are causing the problems. So are we living right now in a new speak moment? From my opinion, yes, we are. The mechanisms Orwell described, the shrinking of language to limit thought, the use of euphemisms to obscure truth, the control of information, they are all alive and kicking today, and many people would say they're more blatant, more aggressive than they've ever been. Whether it's through state influence or corporate power, or combination of both, which is probably more true than any of them. The parallels between Orwell's world and our own, they're hard to ignore. And that, my friends, should give us all pause. But Orwell doesn't stop here in his vivid description of how truth and reality are distorted. He gives us what's known as doublethink, a concept that is as twisted as it sounds. Doublethink is the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs in your mind at the same time and accept both of them as true. It's like in the novel when they say, war is peace, freedom is slavery, and believing it with all your heart. The party in 1984, the novel 1984, uses doublethink to keep the populace in line. If you can get people to believe contradictions without flinching, you've got them in your grip. But how can such blatant, apparent contradictions assist the party in its control desires? And why do politicians do this? Well, I'd like you to consider three things. First of all, This doublethink erodes critical thinking. It undermines people's ability to think critically by just normalizing blatant contradictions. Because when the population is conditioned to accept controversial statements without any question, like war is peace, freedom is slavery, they lose the capacity to analyze and challenge the party's narrative critically. This erosion of critical thinking ensures that individuals are less likely to question authority or recognize the logical inconsistencies in the party's policies. Because if you can't see the contradictions, you can't see the lies, which means you're going to be less likely to resist or rebel. How often do we just shrug our shoulders and say, you have got to be kidding me, when we hear this doublethink coming out of our government? But yet, it's like, whatever, it's complete BS, but what do you want me to do? Number 2, internalized control and censorship. By forcing individuals to accept these beliefs, doublethink creates a state of cognitive dissonance where people just have to reconcile those opposing views and to avoid the discomfort of holding conflicting thoughts. See, our mind, we like to live in a state where what we think is what we believe, and we believe and we live out our life based on our belief system. And when that's constantly in a state of flux, we don't like that. And to avoid that discomfort, people unconsciously align their beliefs with the party's dictates, even if they defy logic. And this internalization of the party doctrine leads to self-censorship, where individuals just suppress their own thoughts and beliefs to maintain the illusion of consistency. People like to fit in. People like to be part of the crowd. People don't want to lose their job, lose their friends, lose their family because they believe something different than everybody else. And, when people start to police their own thoughts by self-censorship, the party then can rely less on external enforcement to maintain that control. And then the third thing that the doublethink does is doublethink allows the party to redefine reality. They can redefine their reality at their own will. And when the population accepts that two obviously contradictory statements are both true, the party gains power to alter historical records, to shift policies, or change official stances without any resistance. If the party says that 2 + 2 = 5, and the people believe it despite knowing it's false, they become disconnected from objective reality. And this disconnection leaves the population dependent on the party to define what is true and what is real. They surrender it. And this effectively prevents them from any idea of an organized dissent or alternative viewpoint to gain traction. And in essence, doublethink keeps the population in line by destroying the ability to think independently, encourages them to self-regulate their own thoughts, and monopolizing the definition of truth and reality. Here's why we can't ignore Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, because he once famously said, quote, "There are no facts, only interpretations." Nietzsche wasn't saying there's no truth out there. He warned us that truth can be manipulated and twisted by those in power to fit their agenda. The party's use of doublethink is Nietzsche's worst nightmare come to life. It's not just the bending of truth. It's snapping it in half. It's making people think that was what it was all along. And then there's the big bad ministry of truth. And this passage describes what it's like at the ministry of truth. It's an imposing physical presence and hints at its all-encompassing control over information and culture and history. Here's a quote for you. Quote, "The ministry of truth which concerned itself with news, entertainment, education, and the fine arts. The Ministry of Truth was startlingly different from any other object in sight. It was an enormous pyramid structure of glittering white concrete, soaring high up, terrace after terrace, 300 meters into the air. The Ministry of Truth contained, it was said, 3,000 rooms above ground level and corresponding ramifications below, scattered about London. There were just 3 other buildings of similar appearance and size, end quote. This is where the magic happens, folks. This is where the manipulation of truth happens. And the ministry's job, alter historical records and rewrite newspapers and basically ensure that anything that is now in effect is the party's version of events. And that's the only existing version. What happened yesterday? Doesn't matter. Ministry of Truth can change it. What's important is that the party is always right, even if it means erasing entire events from history or erasing human beings that might be able to dissent against it. It's like playing God, but with a typewriter or a word processor. Now let's tie this back to one of our postmodern philosophers, Michel Foucault, our go-to guy for discussing on power and knowledge, and had a lot to say about this kind of thing. And Foucault believed that those in power control the truth by controlling knowledge. And that's precisely what we see in 1984. The Ministry of Truth isn't just changing the past, it's controlling the present and the future by deciding what's true and what's not. It's Orwell's way of showing us that whoever controls the narrative controls reality. If you've ever felt like Orwell's 84 is creeping close to home, well, you know, it definitely has. This Ministry of Truth, it's alive and it's kicking in our modern world today. Now, I'm not saying there's some shadowy pyramid building with 3,000 rooms that are rewriting history right now. That's not the way it's going on in our modern world today. It's way more decentralized and honestly more insidious than that. So picture just kind of a sprawling network of political party tentacles, cable news, mainstream media, all weaving their narratives to keep us in line. That's the real modern day Ministry of Truth. When you think about it, we especially notice during election season. You know, a presidential election in the United States of America, trillions and trillions of dollars are at stake. I mean, we're talking big players across the entire globe that may be impacted positively or negatively when one party wins or loses. Not just big tech, not just energy industry. Think of NATO. Think of the countries at war. Think of the Ukraine or Israel right now in our modern world. Who gets elected and who doesn't could impact how much aid is given to one or the other. We're talking literally trillions of dollars. The U.S. economy is, what, $35 trillion in GDP a year. It's a big boy game of politics going on right now. So, but let's talk in America, the different areas that you could act very similar to the Ministry of Truth. So in Orwell's world, political parties, today's political landscape, it's all about revisionist history and just cherry picking facts. Or now the newest term, that's an alternative fact. Yeah, no, that's no accident. Political parties throw around these quote unquote facts to reshape the public opinion, much like the party in the novel 1984. The term fake news gets tossed around like a grenade that's aimed at discrediting any legitimate sources and creating a haze of confusion. And here's another new one. So if you don't accept the official party lines anymore, you're a conspiracy theorist. You're a conspiracy theorist if you don't buy exactly what the party or some agency says. So now they've weaponized that because nobody wants to be called a conspiracy theorist. Makes you sound like you sit in your basement with a tinfoil hat on, when in fact you just may be questioning something that, well, is actually true. And many conspiracy theories get proven true, just as many get proved false. But what's the goal of all of this? To ensure truth is whatever the party wants it to be. To keep the present and the future tightly controlled by twisting the past whenever it's necessary. Another part of our ministry of truth, you could actually say cable news and the legacy media. For me, personally, can't wait till it dies. I think everyone should start to throw as much energy and effort whenever it's viably possible towards independent productions, whether they're podcasts, newsletters, independent media, versus these legacies. I think they've done so much harm to this nation overall, but that's another story for another day. But these guys are the megaphones of the modern ministry of truth. They blast out biased narratives, both on the left and the right. We all know that different networks can make literally the same event look like two different stories. I mean, during elections, for example, coverage isn't just different. It's literally like watching two alternative realities. And what's the result? An audience that's locked into echo chambers where their beliefs are constantly reinforced. And when they run into someone who doesn't believe with them, they literally think they're insane, crazy, or have no connection to reality because their bubble has been wound so tight. And in this world, critical thinking gets tossed out the window. It's exactly like Orwell's citizens, glued to their telescreens, spoon-fed a steady diet of propaganda, and they're unable to see beyond the narrative that they're given. Another one, the role of technology and social media. But here's a kicker: technology. Orwell's ministry of truth had to work hard. I mean, physically altering documents and broadcasts. Orwell could not envision the electronic world that we live in today. Today, our digital platforms do all the heavy lifting. And it's actually probably easier to manipulate the digital world than it was the paper copy world. Social media algorithms, they prioritize what's sensational and what will get clicks and shares. But in the process, they spread misinformation like wildfire, and false narratives can spread faster than you can say fact check. We can't even always trust that our fact checkers are independent fact checkers, and suddenly the line between truth and fiction, it's just erased. And these platforms are shaping not just public discourse, but our very understanding of reality. So just as Orwell's party tried to eliminate dissent, modern tech companies, often nudged by governments, we've actually saw where Mark Zuckerberg comes out, publishes a letter that made it definitively clear that the CDC and the Biden administration wanted them to suppress any anti-COVID-19 vaccine information. They literally told them to suppress it. That's just one example that has broken, that we know a concrete example of. But the role of tech and social media mirrors so much of the ministry of truth. And then collusion and the erosion of trust. Let's just put this cherry on top here of collusion. When political entities, media outlets, tech companies, corporations all cozy up to each other to advance one agenda, you get a powerful force controlling information. And it's a game of control. It ensures that only the approved narratives reach us. This doesn't just mess with our trust in institutions, which is at an all-time low right now. It blurs the lines between truth and fiction itself. As Foucault warned, those who control knowledge control reality. And our modern ministry of truth it's not like that Orwellian pyramid. It's a sprawling, huge machine with lots of people vying for money and power and control. So where does this even leave us? The parallels between the ministry of truth and today's information landscape, they're not just mere coincidences. Whether through political spin, media bias, or algorithmic control, the goal is always the same. Control the narrative, control reality. And just like Orwell warned, when the truth is up for grabs, critical thought becomes a causality, and those in power tighten their grip. Keep your eyes open, folks, because the ministry of truth is actually closer than you think. It's not the exact image as in 1984, but it's here. So where does this leave all of us right now? Well, 1984, it's this fictional work, but the concepts of truth and reality, they're very real for us. Newspeak, doublethink, ministry of truth are just 3 examples. And they should force us to think about how language and thought and truth are manipulated in our own lives. Whether it's through political spin, media bias, or even the way we talk to ourselves. Truth is always up for grabs. And just like Orwell's characters, it's up to us to stay vigilant. Keep questioning and try to resist the easy answers. All right, so we have navigated the Orwellian landscape of 84, where truth is twisted by brute force in many ways, revising history, controlling language, playing mind games. But hold on just 1 minute. It's not the only one who saw this all-powerful government and how it could manipulate truth and reality. So let's talk about Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And this dystopia doesn't smack you over the head with overt control. No, Huxley got a different playbook. One that's all about subtlety and pleasure. And most importantly, conditioning. In Brave New World, the manipulation of truth and reality isn't achieved by rewriting the past or policing thought crimes. Instead, it's all about shaping the very fabric of society through cultural and social conditioning. Huxley's world runs on a different kind of power. One that's more insidious because it's so comfortable. People aren't forced into submission, they're lulled into it. Conditioning. Let's talk about conditioning through hypnopedia. And this is the power of repetition. Let's start with hypnopedia. And they use something in Brave New World called sleep teaching. Now, this isn't just a nifty little sci-fi trick. It's Huxley's way of showing how repetitive messages delivered when we're most vulnerable can shape our beliefs and behaviors. Marketers know about this very clearly. The children of Brave New World, from birth, are fed moral lessons and societal norms in their sleep, over and over and over again, until these ideas become second nature. They don't question them because they've never known anything else. The idea of tabula rasa is a philosophical concept that suggests when we're born that our minds are just blank slates. They're completely empty, without any knowledge, ideas, or mental content. And according to this idea, everything that you know, everything that I know, everything that we think and believe and is learned through our experiences and the environment as we grow up makes sense, right? Imagine just a whiteboard with nothing on it. As we go through life, our experiences, our interactions, our education, they're all markers and that are written on this whiteboard. And we fill it up with knowledge and belief systems and everything that we have and who we are. And it evolves. It grows as we get older. And this concept was made famous by a philosopher, John Locke, in the 17th century. And he argued that since we start with a blank slate, the way we turn out as adults is largely shaped by what happens to us as we grow up. Our experiences and education and social interactions. And essentially Locke was saying that our minds are molded by the world around us. And Brave New World builds on this idea very, very clearly. Because in Huxley's world, In Brave New World, the slate isn't just written on, it's engraved on a stone tablet from birth, and it's never going to be altered ever. The same messaging from birth to death is going to be fed over and over and over again. Thus, people will not grow. They won't come up with creative, original ideas. They won't be an individual that tries to go one direction versus another. The world state has put the values into everyone's minds that they're allowed to have. And there's no room for personal discovery or dissent because the truth has been programmed into the population from birth. Free will, forget about it. Not part of life in Brave New World. You have no free will. So let's talk about genetic engineering in Huxley's dystopia. People are literally manufactured, and each person's role is predetermined. So in the novel, there's the alphas, the betas, the gammas. They all know their place, and they're all perfectly happy to stay there. Why? Because their reality has been engineered from their birth. Then this takes us to another philosophical concept called determinism, and the idea that every event, including human action, is determined by preceding events in accordance with the law of nature. And in Brave New World, Huxley stretches this idea to an extreme, where free will is nothing but an illusion, because everyone's fate has been programmed into them. So imagine if you were told from birth that you were going to be a carpenter. And every message that you're ever told, the only things you're allowed to learn is to be a carpenter. The only things that you read are about carpenters. The only people you see are other carpenters. It's just carpenter, 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 carpenter. And even when you're 2, 3, 4, they buy you the little toy sets that you build stuff like a carpenter. Everything is exactly designed so you become one thing. That is the level of social engineering that existed in Brave New World. It's pretty powerful when you think about it. And that societal condition, compound that with the societal conditioning, the soft power of control, where people are literally taught, you're going to love what you do, no matter what role it might be. The idea isn't to beat people down with a stick, but to dangle a carrot of pleasure in front of them. It's like, well, how can you have pleasure in that? Well, miraculously, they have this drug, and it's called soma. It's a wonder drug, and I know I've mentioned it before, where you just stay blissfully content. You don't question your reality. It's a perfect system. Because if you're happy and you're content, why in the world would you ever rock the boat in revolution? This aligns with the concept of hedonism in many ways, and the philosophical idea that pleasure or happiness is the highest good. And Huxley's society takes this again to an extreme where pleasure isn't just the highest good, it's the only good. The people of Brave New World are conditioned to avoid all discomfort, pain, or any negative feelings. And what's the result of all this? It's just a population that's so conditioned to pleasure that the very idea of even seeking truth or questioning reality becomes alien. The argument that the world depicted in Brave New World is not just a dystopian fiction, but it's a reflection of certain realities of our modern world that we have right now today. And you look at it, consumer culture and social conditioning. In Huxley's world, the population is kept docile through a combination of these consumer goods. Or when you read the novel, they're constantly obsessed with whatever goods they can afford in whatever role they might be. Entertainment and that drug called soma. Today, we draw parallels the same way. Consumerism it's ingrained in our lives. Modern capitalistic societies, they promote just a constant consumption and immediate gratification as the ultimate goals. This is reinforced through advertising and social media and the culture of instant everything. Just like in Brave New World, where the state encourages citizens to indulge in their desires, today's consumer culture promotes a similar distraction. Just watch the TV commercials. Look at the Instagram ads. Look at everything that you see. It's just encouraging constant consumption. And, Huxley, the role of technology in media is so powerful. And Huxley could even see that before time even got here in our media platforms. They keep people engaged with endless streams of content, from reality TV to viral videos to creating what Huxley described as non-stop distractions of the most fascinating nature. TikTok is famous for this. There are stories of kids that might spend 2 to 4 hours a day streaming short form video on TikTok. That's scary. This constant bombardment of trivial information, it just drowns out more critical discussions, building yourself up in other ways, whether it's physically, intellectually, mentally, and it conditions society to remain passive and disengaged from really important social, political matters, or heck, even your own personal development. And the pharmaceutical and behavioral conditioning. And this is where that drug, soma, comes into play. The widespread use of pharmaceuticals in modern society is scary. We have medications for mental health, and for some people they are essential and beneficial. But let's be honest. Can we just be real for a minute? So many people self-diagnosing on the internet, and doctors, shame on them for prescribing drugs for mental disorders over and over and over again to modify behavior versus dealing with core problems. It's a shame. It's a scam. But it's the world we live in. And this really mirrors Huxley's idea of using chemicals to placate the population, to keep the population under control. Keeps them content and subdued rather than encouraging them to address root causes of their dissatisfaction. Social conformity and loss of individuality. I would say this is maybe one of the most important themes that you see inside of this particular novel from Huxley. The suppression of individuality in favor of conformity. And we see this pressure for the youth to conform to a certain ideal, whether it's physical appearance, behavior, beliefs. It's overwhelming. And it just puts an avalanche over the top of people to give up their individuality to fit in. It erodes critical thinking when you have to worry about your social conformity. And so I think all of these mechanisms of control, whether it be cultural conditioning, consumerism, technological distractions, pharmaceutical management, we see every single one of these in our modern world the same way that we see them inside of these novels. Sure, the tone and texture and color is a little different, but the concept is completely the same. And Huxley's vision that the best way to alter reality is through these conditioning tactics. It's definitely a whole lot of validity in that. So what does all this mean? I mean, as you're reading these novels and as I read these novels, what does it all mean? So Orwell shows us a world where truth is manipulated through overt force and control. Huxley presents a very subtle form of manipulation control. Here, truth and reality are controlled not by rewriting history, but by shaping the human mind from the ground up. Through hypnopaedia, genetic engineering, social conditioning, people are made to accept their reality without question. Not because they're forced to, but because they've been conditioned to. For me personally, And it's something for you to consider. I think Huxley's world is even more terrifying in many ways than Orwell's. Because it's one thing to resist an obvious oppressor. It's another to recognize you're being controlled because things are comfortable. It steals your humanity, steals you as a human being, as a person. See, the manipulation of truth and reality, you don't always have to have a big evil building and a ministry of truth raining down new news and changing news and deleting news and adding news. Can happen in more invisible internal ways, more pervasive ways, because you're actually welcoming, you're accepting the manipulation. So now that we've walked through hypnopedia and genetic engineering and the societal conditioning, it's one more critical piece of Brave New World that we're going to talk about in detail, and that's the drug use, because it really is the crux of control. And even though I've talked about it, I want to really dive into this because I think it's the most important. And that drug is soma. It's a wonder drug. Keeps the wheels of this dystopia turning. If at any point that social engineering doesn't work exactly perfectly, well, they can just hand the people a couple grams of soma and voila, all that mental anguish or that discomfort just goes away, and then after they go right back to their mind-numbing business in whatever state of blissful complacency they were put into to begin with. See, soma's more than just a pill. It's state-sponsored escape from reality. At the moment of any discomfort, dissatisfaction, or heaven forbid desire, personal desire for anything, they pop a soma and slip into a haze of contentment. No need for a rebellion or questioning when the drug can take care of that for them. But let's think about what this really means. Freedom, it's gone. Passion, a thing of the past. Strips away the essence of being human in our ability to feel deeply, to struggle, to strive for something greater than ourselves. And in Huxley's world, these emotions are dangerous because they could lead to dissatisfaction without them. And dissatisfaction is an enemy of the world state. So what do? Give them soma, smooth out the rough edges of life, keep everyone calm, content, and most importantly, controllable. Philosophically, this ties to the idea of existentialism, the belief that life's meaning is found through individual experience, freedom, and choice. Think of Jean-Paul Sartre, who argued that existence precedes essence, meaning that we create our own meaning through our actions and our choices. But in Brave New World, soma eradicates this possibility completely because it has dulled the mind, it's suppressed the soul's yearning for something more, and it replaces it with a shallow, chemical-induced, mild state of happiness. And the world state doesn't just want people to be happy, they want them docile. So what's the end game here? With the world state, it's creating an alternative reality where the only thing is happiness, but it's hollow. It's a materialistic version of happiness. It's stripped of depth and meaning. It's the kind of happiness that comes not from achieving something great or overcoming a hardship or discovering a profound truth, but from being comfortably numb, disengaged from the world, and content with the crumbs of pleasure that the state provided. This is Huxley's warning. When a society prioritizes comfort over freedom, pleasure over passion, consumerism over true fulfillment, it's easy for those in power to maintain control. The people become their own jailers. They're happily taking their soma. They're shopping for they're shopping in the stores or watching their next Netflix binge gratification, and never once are they questioning the deeper purposes of life. In this way, Brave New World shows us that the manipulation of truth and reality doesn't always require force. It can be achieved just as effectively through the numbing allure of material and mindless pleasure. something for all of us to think about. So that's a wrap for today's deep dive into the dystopian worlds of 1984 and Brave New World. But next episode, we're going to go into another of the most pertinent topics of dystopian literature, individuality and freedom. So I hope you got a deeper understanding of truth versus reality and how that's manipulated differently in two dystopian novels. The goal is the same, the tactics are different. And as we wrap up, just think to yourself, what do you think? What do you think our world, our modern world right now, our postmodern world is more fixated on? Is it the brute force of a 1984, or is it the more subtle Brave New World? Or probably, at least partially, it's both. It's both of them. But next week, truth versus freedom. Next week is individuality and freedom. Or truth and reality, and individuality and freedom. And we'll start off recalibrating where our heroes are in the novel as now we're like deep into it. We're getting close to the apex force before everything comes crashing down here. So we'll recap some of that, and then we'll take on individuality and freedom full force. So far, we've been setting the stage to the background, but in the future, the action in the novel starts to pick up dramatically. So we'll be exploring Winston's desperate struggle for personal freedom, and then we'll switch gears to the Brave New World, where the loss of individuality is just woven into the fabric of who they are, and what happens when someone who wasn't born into the genetic engineering shows up in that world. It's really fascinating to look at. And so until we get there, thank you so much for tuning in, and look forward to and having you on board for the next lesson. Take care.